Today's lesson is going to be about understanding what a reciprocal is. So you might want to pause the video, write a title, reciprocal, and write the date. Okay, so this just goes through what reciprocal is. So the word comes from Latin reciprocus, and re means back and pro means forward. And that will make sense when I explain to you what a reciprocal is. If you look on the top right, it talks about how we find the reciprocal. Now, when I teach reciprocal, I teach that it is 1 divided by our number. And the other thing that's worth remembering is that when you multiply reciprocals, the answer will always be 1. If you're going to copy anything from this page, I would copy that top right section. Now you'll see what I mean. If you look in the bottom left, find the reciprocal of 9. Well, remember, it's 1 divided by our number. Our number is 9, so the reciprocal of 9 will be 1/9. For part B, it's a little bit different. Find the reciprocal of 4/3. So we want to do 1 divided by our number. Now, we're not going to leave that number like that. We don't leave answers as sort of a fraction within a fraction. If you type that into your calculator, it will actually give you 3/4. And if you want me to explain that, think about what happens when you divide fractions. If I am dividing 1 divided by 4/3, remember what we do is we do 1 multiplied by 3/4. 1 as a fraction is 1/1. 1 times 3 is 3. 1 times 4 is 4. Now, don't worry if that bit didn't make sense to you. Type it into a calculator. 1 divided by 4/3. It will give you the answer 3/4. Some harder examples are over here on the bottom right. The reciprocal of 0.4, again, it's 1 divided by our number. Am I going to leave it looking like that? No, because we don't leave decimals in fractions. What I'm actually going to do here is I'm not going to think of it like that. I'm going to go back to this number 0.4. I'm going to write it as a fraction. Now I can do that as 4/10 or as 2/5. They're both 0.4. And then just have a little look and remember what happened when we were over here. 4/3 became 3/4. If you need a calculator to help you work this bit out, that's fine. 1 divided by 4/10 becomes 10/4. And that's the same as 1 divided by 2/5 becomes 5/2. Both of them are 2.5. Have a little think about that. Have a look what's going on. So the reciprocal can be harder than you think it's going to be. But if you have a number as a fraction, you can find the reciprocal of it. And you might have realised now, remember we've gone from 4/10 to 10/4. We've gone from 2/5 to 5/2. You might be starting to see what happens. I've written it as 2/5, which is at the decimal. Personally, I wouldn't write it like that. I would leave it as 5/2. And then the final one we're going to look at is 4 2/3. I mean, you could just type in 1 divided by 4 2/3 into your calculator. You might write that as 1 divided by 4 2/3. Make sure you use the correct button on your calculator to type this in. Or, if you wanted to do it without a calculator, I would change 4 2/3 to an improper fraction, 14/3. And if you've noticed what's happening, to find the reciprocal, well, that would just be 3/14. 1 divided by 14/3 would be 3/14. Now, it's very difficult for me to go into any explanation further about this because there'll be something in there where you think, hang on, I don't really get what that bit was. So maybe watch it again. Maybe have a little think, maybe pause the video, and if there's someone there you can say, it's this bit, I just got lost at this bit, get someone to explain the things I've just talked about. On the previous section, I talked about the two most important things to kind of write down and remember. A reciprocal means is 1 divided by my number. So I'm going to do some at the bottom. The reciprocal of 6 is 1 over 6. Oh, by the way, notice I'm not writing an equals. These two things aren't the same. They don't equal each other, so I'm always using an arrow. If you look back at the previous thing I talked about, I was very careful about where I used my equal signs and where I used my arrows. The reciprocal of 2/3, 1 divided by 2/3 is 3 over 2. And then if you look at this second bit, let's just test it. Let's show it works. When you multiply reciprocals, the answer is 1. So what happens when we do 6 multiplied by 1/6? Well, in case you forgot, when you multiply a whole number by a fraction, you can write it like that if it helps. Then we multiply the numerators, 6 times 1 is 6, and we multiply the denominators. Is 6 divided by 6 1? Yeah. Now let's look at this second one. When you multiply reciprocals, the answer is 1. So if I multiply these two, they have to be reciprocals of each other. You can't multiply random different. They've got to be the reciprocal of each other. So we multiply the numerators, 2 times 3 is 6. We multiply the denominators, 3 times 2 is 6. They're both 6 by coincidence. That won't always happen. That's 1. You could do it with 3/7 and 7/3. They're reciprocals of each other. 3 times 7 is 21. 7 times 3 is 21. It's 1. Reciprocals, when you multiply them together, if two numbers are reciprocal of each other, you will get the answer 1. And just to point out something else out as well, if I wanted the reciprocal of a quarter, what is 1 divided by a quarter? 4. They work both ways. I'm saying what's the reciprocal. It works both ways. These numbers are the reciprocal of each other. The idea of what a reciprocal is might be completely new to you. You might actually benefit from going back to the beginning of this video and watching it again. You might have sort of think, yeah, I get the idea, and want to go to Hegarty Maths clip 71, give those questions a go. Or you might want to watch Hegarty's video just to get a bit of a different explanation of it, because the more something is explained to us, the more chance we've got of understanding it. The other thing it's worth understanding is reciprocal isn't on its own something that you can do a lot with, but when it's linked into other topics, it's quite important. When we divide fractions, what we then go and do, and you might not, the same words might not have been used, but what we actually do to do that fractional division is we multiply by the reciprocal. So notice now that these two numbers, that's the reciprocal. So when we divide by a fraction, we multiply by the reciprocal. The other place it's used is in graphs. If I have a linear graph, then if another linear graph crosses, if they intersect at 90 degrees, those two graphs will have negative reciprocal gradients. So you will find the reciprocal of the number, but also one of them will be negative. So that's another place reciprocal comes in. It's used quite a lot more at A level, but also in perpendicular graphs at GCSE. So now, to check your understanding and make sure you understand what a reciprocal is and can use it in future, go and have a go at the questions on Hegarty Maths clip 71.